Welcome to another episode of the School Podcast. In this episode, we have CEO Rob Tarn. When we filmed this just a couple weeks ago, Rob was the CEO of the Northern Education Trust. And the news has now come out that he's got a new role overseas in Dubai, which makes this an even more special episode because if you go onto Google, there's not much information out there or interviews from Rob sharing his philosophy, story, success, struggles. There isn't much out there. So because of the new news, I think this episode is even more valuable, and I think this episode will benefit and have an impact on everybody in education. Before we get into it though, a massive thank you for Gadget for filming this, making the podcast happen. They create world-class videos for schools, so do get in touch. Also, Dreams to Reality. We run high-end programs in schools focused on mindset, academic performance, mental health, you name it. Do get in touch with us as well. And access education. Anyway, that's a wrap. Let's get into this episode. Rob Tarn, a massive thank you. Let's do it again. And can't wait. Let's go. Welcome to another episode of the School Podcast. And today we are in Hartlepool with the one and only, the legend, Rob Tarn. How are we doing, Rob?
Good, how are you?
Thank you for...
You've had a long trip north.
Yeah, long trip north,
right.
Which I'm used to. Dave isn't necessarily.
Need your passport?
No, not this time. To be fair, sometimes I do fly to Newcastle, but you still don't need a passport. But thank you. We've been communicating. Well, we first started back in lockdown.
Yeah, I remember.
When we really started to push the podcast, but we kind of pulled back a little bit. I focused on business a bit more. But here we are now, and you're somebody I've always wanted to get onto the podcast because I've been fascinated by your schools. I hear a lot about your schools, the philosophy behind it. So really today, what I want to do is dive into your story a little bit, but also your philosophy in education as well, and the success that you've had. With that said, if you was on holiday in Ibiza, living it up, and somebody said, "What do you do, Rob?" What would you say to them?
I'd probably just say I work in schools. I've never really had a view that I wanted anyone to know kind of what I do. I think the problem when you work in schools is if people where you live and in the local pub know that you work in schools, you then inevitably get the questions about, well, what's that school like? Is that school any good?
Got you.
And I'd rather just be at work and then be at home.
Okay. We'll dive into that whole kind of idea of that home life and a balance as well. But how did you get working into education? Have you always worked in education?
No, I did a degree in biochemistry.
Okay.
And just because I never knew what I wanted to do with it, but I liked science at school, I wanted to learn more, so I did A-levels in science, and then I wanted to learn more, and I did a degree in science. And I never really had a career in mind. But my brother became a science teacher. And I never really... I liked the idea of teaching, but I was a bit scared of the idea of teaching secondary school children. I thought they'd be difficult to handle. I remember thinking I could probably cope with primary kids, but secondary kids might be a bit tough. And then it turns out it's the other way around.
Yeah, true.
And so my brother said, no, you ought to come to where I'm teaching. I think he was working in Sheffield.
Is your brother older?
Yeah, he's older than me, and he'd actually worked at the pit with my dad. He went straight to the pit from school and then did his qualifications in the evenings and then became a teacher quite later on when he was in his late 20s. And so he said, why don't you come into my school and just sit at the back of one of my lessons and see what you think? And I got really hooked on the idea of the feeling you get when you know a young person finds something really complicated and you think of a way of explaining it that makes them say, I get it now. And the feeling that gives you is like nothing else in the world. And from that moment of standing in my brother's lesson and thinking, I wonder if there's an analogy I can use, or I wonder if there's a way I could explain it where, you know, because people used to say like the worst teachers in the world are the teachers who say, you don't get it, son.
Wow.
Right, and the best teachers in the world are the ones who say, I just haven't found a way of explaining it yet. Right, so trying to think of analogies and ways of explaining chemistry, physics, whatever, in a way that a young person could then access that stuff and say, oh, I get it now, made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Like I've never felt the kind of job satisfaction in anything else I've ever done. And so I just I started out as a science teacher in the late 90s.
Let's go back a little bit, because there was something you just said. Firstly, a couple of questions. Where did you grow up? And you say the pit.
The pit, yeah, the colliery, yeah.
What's that? Tell me more. So where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a mining village in Barnsley in South Yorkshire, called Grimethorpe. It's quite famous for Grimethorpe Colliery Band.
Okay.
It was where they filmed Brastoff, if people remember that film with Pete Postlethwaite and whatever.
A bit too young.
Yeah, maybe so. It was set during the miners' strike.
My hairline might tell
it was set during the 1984 miners' strike.
Okay.
Both my dad's dad and my mum's dad, so both my granddads, worked at the pit.
Okay.
My dad worked at the pit. My brother worked at the pit. Or my elder brother worked at the pit. And we were just, the five of us lived in a 2-bedroom pit house in a mining village. And I grew up in a mining village in the 1970s and 80s in Barnsley. And that, I had a nice childhood, thanks to my parents. But it was a tough place, like a really tough place. And when I went to school, and I think some of what drove me, or still drives me in education, is when I went to school, it was the time when, if your parents worked underground, if your dad worked underground, you were guaranteed a job at the pit. And you'd be stupid not to take it, because that's what generations of your family had done. So why would you even need a careers interview if you're guaranteed a job at the pit? Your dad works at the pit, what do you need a careers interview for? Yeah. And I said, well, I don't want to work at the pit. Like, I want to go to university. And like, no one in my family had ever been to university. But the school, and I left school. It's it's laughable really now. But at the time I went to school, I had a good relationship with the teachers who taught the subjects that I liked. And I tried hard. And if I didn't like the subject, I didn't try hard, and I didn't get on with the teacher. It's the old story, right?
Which is common, yeah.
So, loved my chemistry teacher, loved my biology teacher, loved my maths teacher, had a very difficult relationship with my English teacher. And my English teacher at some point kind of gave up the ghost on it and just said, well, why don't you just not come to these lessons? Why don't you just sit outside in the corridor?
In the lessons that you didn't like?
In English.
Yeah, okay.
So I eventually... she just put me in the corridor, and at one point they let me get the Question of Sport board game from the library to play with a mate of mine who also kept getting kicked out of English. And the deputy had to walk past now and again and help us with the picture round, and it was, no one ever rang my dad or my mum. Like, no one ever rang home and said, like, oh, he's a nightmare. He's going to fail his English, which I did. And no one ever rang home. And it wasn't that I was scared of my dad. And Dad never laid a finger on me, but the idea of disappointing my dad would have crippled me, and I would have just sorted myself out and worked hard. So when I left school, I failed my English. Wow. And I went off to Barnsley College, where I said I wanted to do A-levels in science, and they said, well, you can't do A-levels because you haven't passed your English. So I said, well, I've got an idea. Why don't I do my English at college while I do my A-levels? And they said, yeah, it worked that. So as soon as I started doing my A-levels, because I knew I couldn't do English, I was very clear that I hated it and it hated me. So I never did it. So I did my A-levels, but I didn't do my GCSE English. I didn't bother. So then I wanted to go to university in Manchester, and they said, well, you can't come here. Yeah, you can't come here, you haven't got your English. And I said, I tell you, I know what I'll do. I said, I'll do it while I'm at university.
We said yes.
Then they said, that'll work.
Yeah.
So the admissions tutor said, yeah, that'll work. So I went off to Manchester and never did it. Right? Then they finally catches up with you, because then when you want to be a teacher, you've no choice.
Okay.
So when I then went to the University of Sheffield and said, I want to train to be a teacher, I want to do my PGCE, they kind of said, well, you can't because you haven't got GCSE English. And I said, I do it distance learning while I'm training to be a teacher. And then I did, and then I went and sat the exam in my mid-20s, surrounded by 16-year-olds.
Wow.
At Barnsley College as a distance learning and I got an A star. And I found it very easy. And what I realised is that when young people leave school saying that they're not very good at something, the school did that to them. It wasn't ever them. So all those parents now, I'm getting a bit, sorry, all those parents now will say to their kids, oh, I was rubbish at science as well. The school did that to them. And so my view is we just can't have that. So that's why I think that's where a lot of the drive to do what I've done over the last 30 years in the communities I've chosen to work with has come from.
And what communities would you say you work in?
Well, they're predominantly former industrial northern towns and cities. So I've moved from Barnsley to Doncaster to Worksop to
and what are some
Stockton, Sunderland, Newcastle, Gateshead.
Yeah. So for people like myself who live in Bristol or down south, what are some of the characteristics of those type of cities and towns?
So levels of high unemployment and socioeconomic disadvantages, high disadvantage, and in our primary schools, as an example, 60% of our primary children receive pupil premium funding. So 60% is more than double the national average. And in secondaries, it's 50%. And we have secondary schools that have up to 67% pupil premium. And traditionally, those communities are what you would describe as white working class, former industrial, mining, steel, mill towns in the north of England.
As you know, I work in a lot of schools up in the northeast as well.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Majority with pupil premium students, and there is a difference. And even working in schools down south compared to I've got a soft spot for the northeast. And I talk about it when I do big talks sometimes. I always leave the schools feeling tired but feeling inspired. So there's it's a hard day's work, but it's like there's a purpose behind what we're doing. And I think that's obviously you building the trust and the work that you're doing kind of backs that philosophy that I got, which kind of moves us onto your northern model I want to talk about. Because for me, everything you talk about here is really important. I think it's discussed heavily in education, but there's many points you've mentioned on your northern model, and we'll pull it up on the screen as well. Which I think resonates with my message as well. Would that be okay? So for the structure of today, we don't have to go into too much detail of some of it.
I'll tell you where it came from. I think the interesting bit of it is that there's two interesting parts of the school improvement model. And then it lands itself in the centre of the argument about do you have a model, don't you have a model?
Okay.
The difference between autonomy or earned autonomy and uniqueness, and the difference between that and ethos and consistency and standards and expectation. Okay. So you have to go back to when I came to the trust in 2017. I came from quite a successful academy trust, and I'd had a lot of success in turning around schools as a head. I think I'd done 5 schools that were less than good or inadequate, I think in 5 years, and that's what I did. So I went from one school to another as a head or an executive head, and that's kind of what I did. And then when I came to this trust was very, very different to my old trust. So this trust was more a collection of schools that had quite a lot of autonomy, and so the school would determine the school's curriculum, the school's behaviour policy, the school's approach to makeup, the school day, everything.
Everything.
Right. So it was very, very like almost you'd say a loose trust by design. And my experience then tells you, well, when you do that, when you leave lots of the decision making locally, what you inevitably get is that the schools are as good as the heads are. You get a good head, you get a good school.
Okay.
Because in a standalone school, it's always the head. It's just the head. Unless the head's new, it's always the head. Like people say, oh, it's behaviour, it's the head. It's always the head. I mean, somebody, I can't remember if it was Roger Pope or someone said that, 80% of what happens in a school is directly attributable to the actions of the head teacher. I think it's probably a bit higher than that. So in quite a loose federation, or a loose multi-academy trust,
if you got a great head,
you get a good school.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you don't. Now, some of the schools in this trust, many of the schools in this trust had a moral purpose to take on and to try to turn around the schools that had never been good, or outstanding in their history, right? And took them on very quickly. Didn't have a consistent school improvement approach to turn them around, but wanted to turn them around. And we're talking about schools that, like, I don't like the phrase tough schools, but had been traditionally difficult to lead. All right, so everyone had a go, including 80 years of local authorities and merging them into new schools. Never worked. So when I arrived at the Trust, I think 18 out of the 20 schools were below floor standards. 10 schools had never been judged good by Ofsted. And where you got a good head, like here in Dyke House, you got a good school, or you got a good head, like in Grangefield across in Stockton, like Nicky Gibb, you got a good school. And other heads that could be good heads with the right structure and support around them struggled on their own because they're tough schools, like, as people would have it, right? People would say they're tough schools. So when I started, I didn't really know what to do, but I had led a lot of schools that were like the schools in this Trust. And this sounds utterly ridiculous, right? It sounds ridiculous, but I said to my wife, I said, I think what I'm going to do is what I used to do in that first 12 weeks in a school as a head. I think I'm just going to try to do that everywhere at the same time, because I can't think of any other way of doing that. So to do that, I knew that I needed to create a model to act as a framework that we could hang systems on, so that leaders would then have the same nomenclature. So then it wouldn't matter which school you worked in, because you spoke the same language, because you have to get tighter.
Similar to the Trust you was at before.
Similar, yeah. And there was a model at the Trust called something else.
Yeah.
And so I sat in July during my summer holidays.
In Ibiza?
No, in Billingham, in Stockton on Tees. and I put the barbecue on, and it was going to be like 24 hours, this beef on this barbecue. So it was going to be like an all-nighter, and ridiculously. But it's like one of those where every hour you have to put a log on, and then you get in your chair, and then another hour you're open the thing, you put another log on, and it's ridiculous, really. But I thought by the time that beef comes off that barbecue tomorrow, I'm going to have written a school improvement model. And then I shouted at my wife and I said, Jo, I've decided what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it spell the word Northern, because we're in the North and we're the Northern Education Trust. And I knew you had to start with leadership is everything, right? So I had to start with leadership, but I couldn't think of a word for leadership that began with N. This
almost feels like when people say, Cameron, how do you become the number one person to work with teenagers? Yeah. I said, I just created a website and put it on there.
Yeah. So what I did is, but what I realised was that in schools that have underserved communities for a long, long time, you get excuse cultures developing, right? That it can't be done, it's difficult, we've got a tough gig, with our parents, with the kids we take, we do our best. And you can excuse very low standards for the most disadvantaged children. You know that. Like, that's not a new thing. And that was quite apparent in a lot of schools in this Trust. And so I went in the end with that there's no exceptions and there's no excuses.
Quickly, that low expectations, is that through the whole school?
Yeah.
Is that like teachers, head teachers?
Well, head teachers' expectations of teachers, and teachers' expectations of what children are capable of, and leaders' expectations of how children can behave. So, as an example, you get mad things like you'll get a huge support staff structure, but behaviour's horrific, right? But the justification of the head is, well, we serve a really tough community. You don't understand what it's like round here. So I've got these 5 people called behaviour managers.
It's different for me. It's that, when somebody's going through a personal challenge, it's like, no, it's different for me. But it's like, actually... What I'd seen in 27 inadequate schools that I'd worked in over 10 years, I'd seen that in every town. I'd heard it all before. It's always nonsense. Like, I'd heard it too many times to tolerate it. And so you'd say to a member of staff, what do you do?
And you go, well, I'm a behaviour manager. And like kind of one of the things I do is if the kids don't go to their lessons when the bell goes, I take them to their lessons. And I say, do you think can be told that when the bell goes, they have to go? Well, no, you don't understand. It's tough here, you know.
You don't understand.
And then bizarrely, you can end up with 30 support staff less 3 years down the line, and standards are through the roof, and the kids look immaculate, and the self-esteem's through the roof because they're being successful, and it's the same staff with the same kids. Because in the end, it's just a leadership, it's a function of leadership. That's all it is. And so the Northern model is just literally a framework that I said to my leaders in my trust, we are going to hang systems on this, and we're going to use those systems everywhere.
Okay.
Okay?
So no exceptions and no excuses.
Yeah.
You've kind of just...
80-20.
You've just kind of covered that a little bit.
Yeah.
You said that the 80-20, I know a little bit about it.
Yeah.
When you first took over the trust, was it safe to say it was 20-80?
Yeah, or less.
Or less.
5-95.
Okay.
I mean, it's safe to say it's not 80-20 now. It might be 100-none.
Yeah, got you.
Like like the secondary school systems are the same.
What does that mean? Like, from everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the school day. So do it like this. Imagine you say, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to employ 30 outstanding teachers that I can deploy to schools where I need to deploy them. Right? I've got 5 outstanding English teachers, and if I've got a problem in English at this school in this town, I'll send 2 of them to that school, and they can teach there all day. They can teach year 11 all day. So let's start with, okay, it's predicated on, you're going to have these teachers who work between multiple schools and leaders who work between multiple schools. So if you gave those teachers a piece of paper, all right, and you said, right, write down on that piece of paper the things that you might like to be the same in each school to make your life easier. What would you say? Like, what would they come up with to make it easier for them to do the same job in multiple schools?
I guess just a system in place where you don't have to think. You can just...
Same marking policy, maybe.
Just pick something up and you can go in.
So school day, so the bell goes, and you don't go, what period's that, miss? That period 1 or 2?
Yeah.
Bell goes, you go, it's period 3.
Time?
It's the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Same curriculum. So you teach the same lesson to year 11.
After school interventions?
Same behaviour system. Same marking policy, if you've got one.
Rules?
Same.
Uniform?
No, I didn't go that far.
Cut that.
No, I left the uniform as an identifiable...
Interesting.
I don't know why I did.
So that was a conscious decision?
Yes, I think it was. And other people had seen the economies of scale by putting all of the kids in the trust, in a trust uniform in year 7, and then after 5 years, they're all in the trust uniform. But I left the school logo alone. So
I've seen that come.
So on the signage, you get the school logo, you get the trust logo.
Because I came and I seen the logo to this school. Yeah. I thought, oh, that doesn't quite match up with the branding of Net.
Yeah. And some of the colours clash because some of the logos are green and it don't look great with purple. But I've left it alone that bit. But everything else is the same.
Yeah.
So we have this thing called Proud Friday, right? Where all the kids at break time on a Friday bring their pile of books to a central space, and staff man the table, and the kids show that they're proud of their work. And you get hundreds of kids showing up, right, to show that they're proud of their work. And here it's called Proud Friday. And in our school called Kersley Academy in Bolton, it's called Proud Thursday. Because they have theirs on Thursday, right? If you say to that kid in Bolton, what are you proud of? They go, my geography, sir. I go, that's great, that, isn't it? And they go and they get their proud sticker. And if you say to that kid, do you know that they do this at a school like 100 miles away in Hartlepool? No. Nor do they care. It's just their school. Yeah. It's the only school they go to. It's unique to them. This all unique thing, that's an adult construct, isn't it? Like, all schools are unique to children. It's the school they go to. So what we've done is, since 2019, every single system in the trust has been replaced by a new system created by someone in one of our schools.
That must take some time and energy. I can barely put systems into my business, and it's not even...
We've got 47 secondary systems.
Wow.
And they change all the time. And people say, well, people mistake that prescription means restriction. Okay, so if I prescribe that you follow a school improvement model that contains these systems, then I must be restricting innovation. And my answer to that is, what if I prescribe the need to innovate?
Yeah.
Yeah? So I say, yes, you have to use all those systems, but in the 20, in your teams, in your deep learning teams, in your teaching and learning teams, in your deep support teams, in your pastoral teams, I challenge you to come up with a systems that's better than the ones we use now. And I want you to pilot it. Call it a pilot. Like, one of my schools has got more pilots than Ryanair. Like, they just call everything a pilot. So he's like, I'm piloting it. Like, even Dean Buckley, the head's known as Captain Buckley to my team, because he's got lots of pilots running. And what they do is they pilot something. And if they think it's any good, they bring it to my executive team meeting on a Monday. And the member of staff who created it, the TA or the receptionist or whoever, they come to my executive team meeting and they present what they've come up with. And we go, what do we think? And if we like it, we have a big meeting every month with the 100 most senior staff in the trust, all the heads, all the directors of learning, all the executive heads, and that person comes and presents it to that group. And then I say, what do we think? Do we like it? And if everyone says, yeah, we like it, they go, so are we all having it then? From Monday then, we're doing this on Monday. So whatever was in the Northern model has gone now, and we're replacing it with this.
Is that why I've never delivered any work in your schools? Because I have to be in all of your schools, or none?
You'd have to be, yeah, you would, I guess. Yeah, maybe. Although all my schools feel unique, that's interesting. The uniqueness is different to ethos. Like, we're in Dyke House now. It's an outstanding school in the centre of Hartlepool. It's about 55% pupil premium, does really well. I know I'm in Dyke House. It has a feel. It feels like Dyke House. And I can drive over to North Shore, which is one of our other outstanding secondary schools in Stockton, and all the systems are the same.
Can I just
but it feels different.
Yeah, and I have to back that for sure, because just driving in, you're driving through the community, and then you pull into the gates, and then even in reception, it's like, yeah, normal school, but then as soon as the doors open, you walk in, and you're like, wow,
yeah,
this is amazing.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it feels fantastic, and it feels like it's a bubble, isn't it? It's like our schools do incredible things to not create excuses for what our children are capable of doing.
So, be totally honest now, is there any drawbacks to the 80-20 model or the 100-0 model?
In reality, no. If you were to make a list of the benefits, you could go on forever.
Got you.
You could say, well, it splits up workload for teachers because they can plan together. So we got 27,000 lessons that were created by all the teachers in the trust, but they're not reinventing the wheel. I can move a deputy head from one school to another school like that, and their high-vis jacket they can take with them because it says Northern Education Trust on the back, not the name of the school. And when they get to that school, they can immediately start work because they speak the same language as the leaders in the school, because the systems are the same, with the same nomenclature. The kids get a consistency, and what I get is, if I've got 30 schools trying to create something new all the time, then I get 30 years worth of school improvement every year. How could a standalone school keep up with my trust when I've got 30 lots of staff trying to improve something? So the advantages that you can deploy staff, and you can have a common curriculum and you can adapt it, the advantages you could probably go on forever, together with talent spotting. You know, every single executive principle in this trust was in this trust when I started.
So what is one of the criticisms outsiders would say, and how can you debunk that argument?
Yeah, so the only criticisms you get, they aren't so if you take all the trusts in England and you rank them by, let's say, what proportion of the children in that trust get a grade 5 in their maths and English and go off to college? Like, what's the percentage? National average is about 44%, right? We are well above national, even though these aren't average schools.
Yep.
If you look at all the high-performing trusts, whether it's Harris or Delta or Goss, and the list goes on and on and on, That's what they do. They don't call it the Northern model, but they have a way of,
No.
even if they don't call it a model, they do the same things that they know work everywhere, and they're relentless about it. And if you take all the ones at the bottom, they are largely, so if you serve very, very, very affluent, leafy communities, you'd probably be all right giving schools a lot of freedom. You'd probably be all right, because the kids probably come every day and they probably behave themselves pretty much, and the parents are supportive and they try hard.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're going to run schools that in the past have been challenging, or serve disadvantaged communities, I've never seen a trust allow all their schools to pretty much do what they want, and all the kids in that trust get a good deal. Because it's got to go wrong somewhere when you let the school do what they want, right? Because it's down to the head.
Down to the head.
So the only disadvantages are the perception that they'll say, well, it's like McDonald's. It's a bit purple for me. It's a bit restrictive. It's not. Schools should be unique. You know, that this school
But your argument is, it is unique to the child.
Well, unique to who?
Yeah. Just because you're at senior leadership level, you've got 30 schools, for example, but for the children, it is unique.
It's an adult construct, right, by people who went to the school, the parents and grandparents of the children of the academy that you are now trying to turn around. They have a view that it used to be unique, and you've turned it into something that looks like lots of other schools. But in reality, the school that they went to stopped existing 30 years ago anyway, didn't it? And so what if it's the same? If the kids are bouncing up to you in the corridor saying that they're doing really well, so who cares? When I got to college, I was really surprised that the schools that my friends at college went to weren't the same as mine.
Okay.
Right, I was more surprised that schools weren't the same. I said, didn't you do that at your school?
Yeah.
Like, wasn't it called that at your school? Like, wasn't the behaviour system called whatever at your school? I was more surprised that schools were so different. And I'm not in favour of every school in the country being the same. Like, some people would drive that argument all the way to the bottom, wouldn't they?
What I find fascinating though, so we always talk about equality in education, and for somebody who goes to so many different schools, I say there isn't equality in education, because you've got different buildings, you've got different teachers.
Yep.
But I guess your model is building equality in education, because as you said, it's the same everywhere you go.
Well, it minimises the variance.
Got you.
So if you take our primaries, if you look at our primary Key Stage 2 SATs results, for example, 60% of our primary children are disadvantaged, right? But 74% of our disadvantaged school children meet the expected standard and pass their SATs. I think it's the highest of any MAT in England. What we used to get as a trust was the variability between the school that was the lowest performing and the school that was the highest performing. It's huge variance depending on local context, local leadership, local systems working or not working. And what you can do when you have a model is you can minimise the between school variance, because there's a basic expectation of the way that school will function for its children. The only way I ever describe the Northern model is there's a thing you can get in a science department called a quadrat. It's like a metre square, right? And when you do A-level like ecology or biology, you walk up a hill and you drop it on the floor and you count how many flowers is in it, right? And then you get further up and there's less, and you look at how it changes. So science departments have all got them. And what I say is if you stood in a river and you dropped it into a river and it sank to the bottom, right? And our systems are flowing in from one side and flowing out of the other side. They're changing all the time. If the systems are brilliant, they might get stuck. They might stay around forever, because we never replace them. Because you're never going to come up with something better than that. Sometimes we create a system that's absolutely awful, and it kind of just whips through, and you've hardly time to see it because it was a failed experiment. If you then get
you've had plenty
of them,
yeah,
plenty of dead ends.
But you're quick to decide whether it works or whether it doesn't. You don't hold on to it.
No, I'll come back to that though, because there is a risk. The disadvantage of when you said what are the potential disadvantages, there are some. There is one big one, but I'll come back to that. If you then grab your phone, you take a picture of the bed of that river. What's in that square is the northern model today, and that is the same photograph in every school. Tomorrow, the photograph will look different.
Got you.
Some will have been replaced by something better. Someone in a school in Salford will have come up with a brilliant idea and will be using it everywhere, and it'll have kicked something out, right? So the picture tomorrow will look a different picture, but it'll still be the same picture in every school, because when we change it everywhere. The big disadvantage to the tight and deep approach and the school improvement model approach is when you're ahead, you and your SLT, let's say you come up with an idea. You go, I'll know what we'll do. Somebody goes, I know what we'll do. And everybody in this hive mindset, they all go, yeah, that's brilliant. I agree, it's amazing. So you go to your staff on Tuesday night for briefing or whatever, and you go, guys, we're doing this. Here's your PowerPoint, get cracking. And then on Thursday, it's apparent that it was a mistake. It's not working very well. The staff aren't happy with it. They've been to their unions. Like, no one's happy with it, right? And so you call another brief and you go, I am so sorry. I've gone down a dead end there. And there's no harm done. You do that in this trust, you've done it in 30 schools at once.
Got you.
It's hard to unpick. So you better be really sure that what you're going to do, you better listen to a lot of people. And all I've done is surround myself with people who are more talented than me. That's all I've ever tried to do. And you just got to check and check and check. And that doesn't mean lose pace, because pace is everything in school improvement. But you better check before you do it everywhere at once that it's the right thing to do, because unpicking it everywhere.
My name is Sian Lord, and I help deliver the Girls Growth Programme, a programme that helps deliver impact for teenage girls, ensuring that they're happier and healthier on their school journey, with a big focus on relationships, friendships, body image, self-esteem, mental health and mindset.
I'm Natalie. I'm one of the leaders for our Girls Growth Programme, where we discuss important issues such as self-esteem, diet, exercise and confidence.
Think of 3 unhealthy habits that you have for yourself at this moment in time. And when you don't get enough sleep, it's harder to regulate your emotions and small problems can seem much bigger than they are. Exercise isn't just about looking good or staying fit, it's vital for your mental health.
So get in touch today to get the support that your girls need now.
It's tough. Why is pace important?
Well, the problem with traditional approaches to school improvement are that things tend to take an eternity. So you create a working group to come up with a new behaviour system or a new marking policy. They start in September, they report back by Christmas.
Yeah.
Right? They report to SLT by Christmas. And then when we've got that inset day, next March, we'll train the staff on it, and then we'll start using it after May half term, right? By which point, a whole year 11 will get one shot at it, have started their final year of compulsory schooling and finished it. So you could do that, or you could bring a marking policy to an executive team meeting in a tight trust and say, right, are we agreed that we want to do this? Like our live marking. Our teachers don't take books home. They mark live in lessons with pink pen. It's been great for workload. And we loved it right from the off. You could see that we should try it. And we piloted it here in Dyke House, actually. It was created by, I think, an assistant principal and the head of English. Okay. And they piloted it here, and then they brought it to my meeting, and I loved it so much that we got it launched everywhere in the trust in, I think, 2 weeks.
Pace,
yeah. Why not?
What is that marking?
In
short, what?
Well, we just call it live marking, and it's basically that while you're circulating, so you've done your bit of, you've done your starter activity or your bell task, whatever you're doing, you've introduced the new learning, and then the kids are on whatever task they're doing to demonstrate that they can now do something they couldn't do when they walk through the door with a bit of luck, right? And the teacher at that point is circulating, looking for little misconceptions.
Okay.
So you might in maths you might see that a kid. So if a kid's done 10 questions and they get one wrong, they've made a mistake.
Yeah.
If they get them all wrong, they're in error. They don't know what to do.
Not a mistake, they're in error.
They're in error, yeah. The mistake is, I know what to do, I just made a mistake.
Yeah.
And the error, I'm in error, I can't do it. So the teacher might sit by that kid with pink pen and say, listen, I'll do this one for you. Scaffold it a bit. Show them what that looks like. And then I'll come back. Now, if I go to 5 tables and I find that same problem on 5 tables, I might need to stop the lesson and say, guys, back to me a minute. I think we've got a problem here. And I'll find a different way of teaching it, because that hasn't worked. So it's just a bit of pink pen when needed, bit of scaffolding. You might even, Is
it actually a pink pen?
Pink pen, yeah. And they call it pink pen, yeah.
Wow, okay.
And a member of staff here at Dyke House, when they piloted it, said that the 3 most significant incidents of his life were something like Brexit, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and live marking, and the new marking policy. because you suddenly, the idea of taking all these books home and putting them in the car, then leaving them in the boot for the weekend and driving them back, or leaving them at home and saying to the kids, give the books out, Keith, you've got them, sir, have I? Get some paper then, right? All the idea that you were marking books, which has never really had that much impact. Not compared to talking to a kid.
Even when I was in school,
yeah.
you never even look at the feedback.
No, and so what?
Or you might not care too much.
And what did you do about it?
Yeah.
And have you got time as a teacher to mark all the books, probe another question in the marking, and then expect the kids to respond to your marking? And what are you going to do? Mark that? Like you could go, you get caught in an infinite loop. So because there wasn't, abandonment's important in education, and in school improvement, abandonment and challenging the received wisdom of,
What does that mean?
So there's lots of things that are done in schools just because that's how they've always been done in schools, and it's in the DNA. So you start there as an NQT, and that's then you do it, and then you grow up with it, then you become a head of department, and then you train your NQ, and it's always been like that. Teachers have always marked books. They've always taken books home, and they've always marked them, and then they've always brought them back and given them out. So it's good to, abandonment's important. Challenging that received wisdom and having the confidence in your leadership to abandon something. Michael Wilkins, who I used to work for, Sir Michael Wilkins at Outwood Grange, he used to use the phrase confident uncertainty. And he used to say, I'm not really certain where I'm going to end up, but I am confident it will be in a better place than we are now. Yeah. And I think that's right. And abandonment sometimes means taking a leap and just literally stopping doing something without knowing that that's the thing that's working. Maybe you'll break it.
And I think you mentioned Outwood and Sir Martin Oliver, and I think he said in our podcast, sometimes it's not about what you need to do, it's about what you need to stop doing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's similar philosophy.
But
Back to your Northern model.
Yeah.
I've got so many questions, many, and I know we don't have a huge amount of time.
No.
Outstanding leadership.
Yeah.
Explain, how do you know if it's outstanding? Can you measure it? Is there data around that? Do you have a philosophy around what leadership is?
So really, we have a few things that point to leadership behaviours which we know work well in schools. And that is that you're very present, you don't sit in an office, you walk around all day and you catch people being good.
Doesn't matter who you are.
Doesn't matter. Can't be in your office.
Interesting.
So it's all about walk around all day, say well done to a kid, say well done miss, brilliant atmosphere in here, that's fantastic.
So just say in a school, head teacher.
Deputy head teacher, assistant head teacher, just walk around all day. So the job of my trust is to take away from people the stuff that in standalone schools stops them doing that. Estates, health and safety, finance, IT development plan, asbestos management policy, right? We get rid of all of that.
Off topic, how important is the building? So reason why I say that, I feel like there's a difference. I don't know if there's research or data, but sometimes when you go to schools, and
this building's interesting because this building's from the 1950s.
It's an old office block.
It's an old school that they refurbished the front bit of. Okay. So the further back you go, we've just spent $500,000, I think, doing LED lighting and carpeting the corridors and carpeting the classrooms and so on. I did a lot of thinking about this because I'd run a school in Ripon that was from the 1930s, but it was outstanding in every category. Wow. And then I'd gone to lots of new schools that were special measures. So I was kind of thinking, does it make any difference? Like, does it really make any difference? Is it anything to do with it really, or is it about leadership? And what I used to do, I don't do this anymore because I've got kids now and they dominate my entire life. But
how many kids?
I've got 2 kids and they're hard work.
How old?
It doesn't work at home.
Yeah, it never does.
It doesn't work at home. 11 and 6.
Yeah, I remember I spoke a couple of weeks ago at Aston Villa for a trust.
Right.
Aston Villa talking about pupil premium, talking about expectation standards, and smashed it. Went home, my 11-year-old huffed at me, rolled her eyes and stomped up the stairs. I said, yeah, it works in schools.
One of my TAs once came to me when I was ahead and said, he's got problems with the behaviour of his 14-year-old lad, can I have some advice? I said, what makes you think it works at home? like, it's fine at work. And it's hard work, but what I used to do is I used to have a little notepad, right? And I used to write a question on it that I would think about until I came to a view of what I thought of it. It's a good thing to do if you want to be a leader, or you just write. And one of the things I wrote on my little pad was, what difference do school buildings really make? And I wrote it, and I thought, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to have a good think about that. And I thought about it for about 3 weeks. And the view I came up with in the end was that new buildings don't push you forwards, but old buildings can hold you back a bit.
That's that analogy is getting you. Yeah.
That's what I've come up with on buildings.
Say it again.
That new buildings don't necessarily push you forward, but old ones might hold you back a bit.
Wow.
And it's the only way I could explain that actually I'd run this school in Ripon that was outstanding in every category, very high, one of the highest performing schools in North Yorkshire. It was in a 1930s building full of asbestos. And some of the upstairs classrooms had fireplaces, you know, from the 1930s that had just literally been boarded up. And it was hard work. You couldn't supervise the kids very well. You couldn't see down the corridors. Some of the corridors were very narrow.
Cold,
like heating problems. Made it look nice, but you're constantly battling with the building. Didn't stop it being an outstanding school for the kids. And then from there, I went to a school I went to a school then in Middlesbrough, which had moved into a brand new building, had gone immediately into special measures, and one of the lowest performing schools in England, in a £30 million state-of-the-art building. And you do that, you go from one to another, and you think it's leadership really. It's always just the head.
So being an outstanding leader, though, I guess it's not a fixed thing, though, isn't it?
No.
Because people say Rob Tarn is an outstanding leader, but
You haven't spoke to my wife then.
All your children, right? But it's not a fixed thing. So you have to consistently improve and develop and grow, which might fall onto some of your other Northern model. But for you in particular, just Rob Tarn, what does like improvement and growth look like?
My personal view.
Does it look like in your holidays going home and reading educational books on leadership?
No, I don't do any of that.
Okay.
No, I don't read. I read books to my daughter.
Okay.
But they aren't that highbrow.
Cat in a Hat.
More.
Harry Potter.
Oh no, bits frightening. Think like The Enormous Crocodile.
Off topic. Sorry. Listen.
Anyway, sorry. So the reason why I don't is, and I have seen paragraphs from books on educational leadership and business leadership. I've seen paragraphs quoted. And I've come to I think I've come to a view that the answer isn't in the book. Like you're not going to become an outstanding leader by reading a book. There's too much intrinsic qualities in you that make people want to follow people or not, whether it's character or flair or whatever you call it, right? So what I would say is, I don't think you can read a book and become an outstanding leader, but I think when outstanding leaders read books, they notice things about themselves in them.
Wow.
So you're an outstanding head. I think if I've got loads of outstanding leaders in this trust. But if you took loads of my outstanding heads, like Dean here is an outstanding head, you say to Dean, read that paragraph, he might say, do you know what, I do that. But he didn't read that and think, I'm going to do that tomorrow.
No.
Like, watch me crack on. I'll be outstanding now I've read that book. I have the same feeling about when they talk about teaching things like resilience to children, you know.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on resilience?
Well, I just think...
What is resilience in your opinion?
I don't know, because I'm not into all that stuff. Because I think sometimes it's good... Isn't it good to fail and get upset and not be resilient? Because that's when you learn something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that we went through a fad, didn't we, of saying...
resilience,
We went through a fad of saying we're going to teach resilience, and the focus for this half term is resilience.
Was that around COVID time?
No, this was years ago. And it was almost like, I was like, my year 9s aren't going to walk out of that lesson saying, like, it was good that, sir. I didn't feel particularly resilient this morning, but I do now. You've taught me how to be. Like, I don't think that's the way that people develop personal qualities.
Right, let's stop that just a second, because I've got these fads then. Do you ever feel like pressure when a new fad comes in? As a CEO, you have to cover it.
No, because I just think I might do it next time it comes around. Because they work on like a 10-year loop, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So the stuff there'll be stuff on like emotional intelligence or whatever. Or you remember we went through that thing about, it's not about knowledge, it's about skills. Because, the jobs haven't been invented yet. It's not about knowing stuff. And then, of course, there's a complete change of direction with Michael Gove, who basically says, no, it is about knowing stuff. Of course it's about knowing stuff. And I'm guessing we'll come back around to something else.
Got you.
3 or 4 more times before I retire.
I'll keep changing the topic, but I love it. Right, let's look at relentless focus on standards. What does relentless mean to you first?
So, if you said to me, how do you characterise what it is that outstanding schools do? I would say surprisingly little, but they do it relentlessly in a very exacting way every single day. People will say, for example, well, we focus on outcomes. Like, we're obsessed about outcomes for children. And I'll say, so you could go to a special measures school and say to the head, what do you think you're going to get this year? Right, 5+ in English and maths. And the head will go, well, better than last year. No, I know, but what are you going to get? You speak to my deputy, I'm not very good with numbers.
And I should know the numbers.
And I go, oh, hang on. But I bet you know your national insurance number, don't you? You know your kid's dates of birth, you know your number plate. What do you mean you're not very good with numbers? You mean you're just not reading them much.
Yeah.
So there's an obsession about the life chances of children and what you can do for them.
And the detail is important.
And when I came to the trust, I meant exam results because exam results were unacceptably low. So I didn't want to say results because I knew there might become a time when I wanted the word standards to mean something else. It could mean uniform, could mean the quality, it could mean anything we do.
So can we touch on standards? So standards is actually one of my favorite words. And when I do a part of my power program, I work with students 6 days, 12 days, or even if I'm just delivering a one-off assembly, which I don't recommend, where's the impact in a one-off? I'm similar to you, but I will still do that if a school asks for it. And I've got a lot of teenagers have World Cup expectations, however they have Sunday League standards.
Very good, yeah, I like that. I love that.
So it's for me, it's like, how do you, like, oh, you like analogies?
I'm having that one.
So I say to them, you say you want to earn 100 grand a year by the time you're 30, but you can't tuck your shirt in when you're asked. There's a disconnect.
Yeah.
You say you want to become a doctor, but you can't do after school revision club. Yeah. There's a disconnect. Yeah. And I kind of paint the picture for them. And I say, what's the difference in the words? I say, the difference is standards. But what does standards actually look like? So for you, a couple of things is, what does standards mean? But also, over the years since you've started in education, how has standards changed?
There's a saying in education that, you are what you model, right? As a leader, you are what you model. And I think you get into character when you get out of the car. You're not the person you are at home when you get to work. You get out of the car, you get into character, and you stay in character all day. And when I think of standards in schools, I think of absolutely everything. I'll give you an example. If I visit a school for the first time and I've never been to the school, and I walk along the front of the school, there'll be some little bushes. There always are, have you noticed that? Little bushes, right? And they should have built one of those little fences around
They're little
it.
to you.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're head high.
In the undergrowth.
I'm like popping over.
So when you're hacking away in the
Where's
undergrowth...
reception?
Right, in reception. When you're hacking away in the undergrowth and you see a couple of crisp packets, right?
Yeah.
Now I know that standards at that school aren't high enough. Because if there's something I can see that they're not on top of, there'll be lots of things they're not on top of that I can't see. So the crisp packet might not be important. The fact that the head isn't on top of the business manager or isn't on top of the site manager, who therefore hasn't done his litter pick, even though they know I'm coming and we've got some visitors in like you today, so somebody will have been out today to check because you were coming. Like they do it every day, but it's just standards, right?
But I noticed though, because I'm in so many schools,
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by school improvement. But I come in, bounce, wearing what I wear. People think, oh, who's this idiot just coming in? But what they don't understand is I look at everything.
Yeah.
Even how the receptionist introduces you.
It's like the old saying, you're on interview as soon as you get out the car.
Like I was
don't forget you.
I was in a school the other day, I won't mention it, and they won't know it because when we released the podcast, and the assistant principal booked me. I was in the dinner hall having my food, everything. I said, out of curiosity, who's the head teacher? She said, he's in the canteen. I said, wow, he seen me in the school as a visitor, didn't say hello, didn't introduce themselves,
No.
And I found that bizarre, or maybe I don't know.
So what you find is, what you have to tell yourself is, so if the head's not on top of the business manager who's not on top of the caretaker, so there's a crisp packet in the bush. The head's therefore not on top of the pastoral deputy who's not on top of the Senko who's supposed to be doing the review for my son who's autistic. There can't be, because it's the same leader. So if I can see things that aren't right, it means there are really bad things I can't see going wrong. Because standards are on the floor. Because it's not about the crisp packet. It's about expectation of what people do as professionals when they're in front of kids. That's why we say sir and miss and wear business dress. Because I'm not about to say that you can have a go at these kids for not tucking the shirts in if you can't put a jacket on. Like I think it's a profession. It is a profession. It's a special profession, and we are professionals, and we're dressed professionally. So everything from the way that adults dress, the way that adults speak to each other, structure, systems, expectations of behaviour, expectations of mobile phones, makeup, jewellery. That's the age-old classic, isn't it? I'm in the paper because my daughter has been excluded from school for wearing earrings. Nonsense. No child in the country has ever been excluded for wearing earrings, I bet.
So what have they been excluded for?
Saying no to the head when the head said, take your earrings out. You can't say no to the head. Like, you've refused a reasonable request, haven't you? Like, what are you going to do at work? Just say if I fancy it. You're going to have your beard in McDonald's and not net it up because you don't fancy it when you get a job. It's
a good old beard, though.
I didn't mean you. Unless you're thinking about a career move. So I kind of just think. So what generally happens is, because kids tell half truths, right? They run home to tell.
Adults do too.
Yeah, and they run home to get their side in, right? So you got 600 girls at this school, and you go, we don't have earrings. Not because of health and safety, not because I particularly care about earrings, but because I'll then have to decide which earrings are okay and which aren't, right? And then when I see you wearing some earrings that aren't okay, like big loopy ones or something, I'll have to have an argument with you about your earrings, right? And you apply that to shirts tucked in, ties, top buttons fastened.
Socks.
So you say to this kid in year 11, you go into a special measures school and you've got your year 11s right in your hands. You tell them they're the most precious thing in this school. Like, the most precious thing in the world we work with, that's other people's children, right? And you say, you're the most important person in this school and I'm here for you now and I'm going to make sure you pass your exams. And they're doing really well. And then you call them over and you go, come here. And you go, tuck your shirt in for me. Right, okay, fasten your top button for me. Right, do your tie up for me. Right, you're not supposed to have that phone, are you? Right, can you take your earring out for me? And all I wanted to say was, I've heard you're doing well in maths. I just never get there. So you're better off just saying, don't have earrings. It's like this nonsense about phone zones. You can have it in that corridor, but when you go through that door, don't have it. Well, of course they end up having it through that. Then it's in a classroom. Just they don't have phones. Like, you are running the school. So I just said, don't have earrings. And then 600 girls, 596 girls come to school not wearing earrings. And 4 girls are wearing earrings. And you go, girls, just take your earrings out for me. And 3 of them go, sorry, sir. I must have left them in. No problem. Stick them in an envelope, pick them up tonight. And 1 girl goes, well, my dad says I don't have to take them out. Or they'll heal up. Because my biochemistry means he'll heal up in like an hour and a half. Right? So, but I sent you a letter saying don't have them done, didn't I? Don't have them done, because you won't be able to. Well, my dad says I don't have to. And you go, listen, I'm not arguing with you. You can't wear earrings. Just take your earrings out, go to your lesson. Well, I'm not. Well, you can't say no to me, I'm the head. So I tell you what, let's ring mum. So you ring mum, do us a favour. Like, she's got her earrings in. You know we don't have them. Will you just tell her to take her earrings out so she can go to maths? And the girl, and the mum, unfortunately, sometimes they do, most of the time they do. Sometimes they'll say, well, if she don't want to take them out, well, her dad, you know. And I go, well, I'm going to have to exclude her now, because what do I do now? She go, well, can't she sit in your office with her earrings in? Like, can you sit there? What, with your mobile phone that you won't give to me? Well, you've got to go now. So you basically go, listen, you've got to go now. So you're suspended from school. And tomorrow, I'm going to talk to you about how you're going to pass your maths and English. Right? And it'll all be forgotten tomorrow, but don't wear your earrings. Now, that girl goes home, and mum says, why have you been excluded? She'll guarantee say to her mum for wearing earrings. Well, of course it wasn't. It's nothing to do with the earrings. It's never the shoes. It's never the earrings. It's never the phone. It's never the makeup. It's just about expectations, isn't it?
And standards.
Standards, yeah, standards.
Access Education software is there for those busy school days. For the chaotic mornings when getting out of bed without a coffee can feel impossible. We're there for the multitaskers, for the cashless lunch payments, the fussy eaters, and the ones that always forget the school trips, the letters home and the countless emails. And we're there for the teachers, making sure everyone's paid accurately and on time. And we're no stranger to the world of education-related pensions. We're there for the time off, whether you choose it or whether it chooses you. We're here for those looking for the best, for those focusing on developing and empowering themselves and others, and for those looking to build their teams. We're there for those tasked with keeping the budget in check in challenging times, for those planning the recommendations to governors, for budget monitoring and those that need to report on adjustments throughout the year, for those planning the next budget and the next and the next, for the years to come. We're here for the information seekers, insight detectives and real-time data warriors, for those that need accurate reports generated in minutes. We're here for the children, for those that want thousands of award-winning, easy-to-digest learning videos across more than 30 subjects in multiple languages, for the anxious exam takers, and for every single person that wants to make education great. Once the school day is done, we'll still play our part. We're still there for updates and to keep parents informed, and for those homework assignments and all-important grade boosts. We're still there for the governor meeting and the parents' evening, the after-school clubs and the extracurricular classes. And as for the hard-working teachers and staff, we're here, hoping you can find a little extra time in the evenings to unwind. So when the day comes to an end, teachers, parents and children across the land can rest easy, knowing that Access Education software will be there tomorrow to lend you a hand. Access Education, giving you the freedom to put education first.
Right, the T is teaching and learning. I believe we've covered a lot of that already, and I'm conscious of time. Then we've got a H, high expectations, massively talked about. So what I want to do is flip that on its head a little bit. What do low expectations look like? Especially with like teaching children.
Oh, so I don't know whether to address that from up here, which would be just the expectations of what you dress like, the expectations of how you speak to each other and to me, the expectations of the way adults speak to children, the expectations of where the work is pitched and whether it's hard enough for you or whether it's too easy for you, or the expectation that you can't access work so I'll make it easier, all the way down to some children being judged that the expectation is that they can't do GCSEs, they're not capable of doing GCSEs, but that they should be doing entry-level qualifications. And I'm not saying that that's not appropriate for some vulnerable SEND children, but that's overused because expectations of what those children can achieve are too low. So in special measures schools generally, they are marked by, there are low expectations of behaviour, there are low expectations of how children present themselves, there are low expectations of the work they can achieve, they drift into lessons, drift on, drift out. You know, there's 100 kids on the corridor 5 minutes after the bell's gone. You can count them. I used to count them. I'd stand on a corridor, and when the bell went, I'd start a stopwatch. And I'd pull the SLT and say, I counted 112 kids on corridor 7 minutes after the bell was gone.
Not good enough.
Well, what are you doing? So just... And I think...
Do you have like a formula for like truancy? Because I've seen at the moment, or do you have like a philosophy? It probably falls into your model, but I've seen or heard a lot about that being a big issue in schools at the moment, getting students into lessons.
We don't have that issue because our behaviour system makes it really clear that there's a difference between being late and internally truanting.
Okay.
So you can be held back by a teacher who wants to talk to you about your work, and then you can head off 5 minutes after the bell's gone, and you can be 5 minutes late to your next lesson because you say to your member of staff, I'm sorry sir, like Miss so-and-so has been talking to me about this trip or whatever. And you go, all right, yeah, sit down. Or the kid can be deliberately late by dragging their feet, and you think, no, you're just late. There's your detention. There's your detention. You just didn't walk fast enough, did you? But you did that on purpose, and you met up with a mate of yours who's not even in the same class. Now, when you're 10, 15 minutes into a lesson and you've been in the toilets, that you're not late, you've truanted your lesson.
Yep.
You've truanted 15 minutes of the lesson. And the sanction for that is a day in what we call supervision, you know, where you're in a room supervised with other children, away from your friends, you don't get your break and you don't get your lunch break.
For 15 minutes?
Well...
Well,
look, I'm sorry, but...
So, Rob, you've just put my son in isolation all day.
Not isolation. He's not on his own.
Not an isolation.
Supervision.
Right. Supervision.
Yeah, he's supervised. Working.
And he was only late. He had a toilet problem, which means he was vaping in the toilet.
Yeah.
And he's 15 minutes late, and now you're giving him something all
Correct,
day.
yeah.
Surely that's not fair.
Well, I mean, it is the behaviour policy of the school, isn't it? No, it is though, isn't it? Well, let me say it another way. No. Say the bell goes at 8:20.
Yeah.
That's your warning bell, right? The second bell is the bell at 8:25 when the first lesson actually starts.
Okay.
8:20, the bell goes to say, right, start moving to your lessons, because when the next bell goes at 8:25, your lesson's started. Right. The kids here, you'll see them run. They're running across the car park because they know if they get the door for 8:25, they don't get a detention. So they'll run in, and the staff will go on, quick as you can, it's about to go, it hasn't gone yet, you know, and they'll run them in. And it's all good. And then you get the kid who's 8:28. And they go, you got a detention. And parents, understandably, I think, because I'm a parent, would say, okay, you've given him a detention, he's only 3 minutes late. He's only 3 minutes late.
How damaging is that though? That mindset, he's only 3 minutes late.
It's not that, it's where it takes you. Because where it takes you is you say, okay, well, how long do you think's okay? And they go, well, you could give them 5 minutes, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could give them 5 minutes. You could give them till 5:30. 5 minutes late. That's not very late, is it? So then the kid comes in at 8:31. Well, he's only a minute. You're allowed 5. Well, then they're in at 10 to 11. No, I'm serious. That's where special measures schools are. They'll come in when they want. Because you go a bit and go a bit and go a bit, and then it's gone.
As humans, we push boundaries. We always do.
Yeah. Well, kids, we used to say, if you make kids fasten their top buttons, right, they try it on by pulling the ties down. right? If you don't make them keep the ties up, they try it on by unfastening the top button. And it goes on and on and on. And then if you don't enforce that, they try it on by taking the shirts out. Then they're in fancy dress. Right? Then all we're doing is arguing with kids about uniform all day instead of talking to them about their learning.
Yeah.
Is that my phone? Who is this? Sorry.
It's all right. Staff performance then.
Yeah.
How do you, and we've got teaching and learning, we've got stuff around recruitment and retention and staff development. Talk to me about staff. Are people...
I'll talk to you about staff development if that's okay.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm really, really proud of.
Okay.
Immensely proud of it. So we had an Ofsted summary evaluation of the trust in 2023. And there'd been one in 2016, which was quite critical.
Of the trust?
Of the trust, like a MAT review. They don't call them inspections, but it's a review.
So Ofsted come in and check the whole trust?
No, Ofsted had inspected 7 of our schools in the previous 12 months and then visited the trust for 4 days to kind of bring it all together and talk about the effectiveness of the trust in running its schools. And it's a gorgeous letter. It's a gorgeous letter, which I read every week when I'm fed up. And it basically, so it says things like, schools that have recently joined the trust have undergone monumental improvements that are life-changing for children and staff. Wow. Like, it's gorgeous all the way through. Beautiful.
That's a tattoo, that is.
It's a gorgeous letter, yeah. It's a headstone thing, innit? Like Spike Milligan's I Told You I Was Ill. And so it's a beautiful letter. But part of our prep for that, when they said they were coming, is we looked at all of the staff in the trust in senior leadership positions, and we worked out how many of them had been internally promoted and how many were external appointments. And what we found was that from the 74 senior leaders, 67 were internal. Every single head is internal, and all of the exec principals are internal. So bizarrely...
What does that tell you?
So what we've done is we haven't just talent spotted, we've created a system that talent spots, and then we've run that system. And that system has allowed people to step around traditional blockages in the system. So, for example, you're second in science, your head of science is never going to retire, so you leave because you want to be a head of science, right? When in our trust, you can become an aspiring leader and then an associate assistant principal and then an assistant principal. You can bypass the head of department and never be one, but still become an assistant head, deputy head and head. And so when I started at this trust, I said, look, how can we be in a position where we've got 20 schools, but we're advertising for head teachers in the paper? Like, I've got 80, 120 senior leaders in the trust, and I can't develop head teachers. So I took the best 6 vice principals in the trust and I made them associate principals. And I said to them, when I need a head, you're next, so you better get ready. So I'm going to work with you. You're a head teacher in training, so you better get ready. And then they all became heads, actually. And
because then I guess they're talking the net language, aren't they?
Same vocabulary, yeah, same nomenclature.
Same standards, expectations.
So what's interesting is if you come to the trust and a head's got their autonomy and you take the autonomy off them, that head might go. It's nothing personal. They're just like, look, I'm a standalone head. I like being a standalone head. I don't want to do the same as everybody else. And I became a head so I could run this school how I want to run it, not how you want to run it. So I'm off. Best of luck to you. That's fine. It's all good. When my assistant head becomes a vice principal, becomes an associate principal, becomes a principal, they grow up with the Northern model. They don't want their autonomy, do they? They grew up with it. Like, they're one of our leaders. We developed them for that job in our model using our language.
So, on the flip side of that, does that still make them a good head teacher then?
It's a really good question.
Could they leave net?
So that's a really good question. And one of the potential pitfalls is people have often said to me, are you developing head teachers who could go off and do great things in schools on their own? Or are you just developing head teachers that can work in your schools? I think that's a fair challenge. What I would say to that is, I think they're inherently strong leaders who people want to follow.
So that'd be fine.
However, there'll be things that they would have to do in a standalone school that we've protected them from, that they'd have to then do because of all that thing the trust takes out of their way for them. Like they've never had to do anything to do with IT. They've never had to set a budget. They've never had to, do anything towards finance really at all. It all just gets done for them, and then they can be, I think, what most heads want, which is educating children, not being an administrator. I think that's the point of it all. And where trusts work really well, I think they do a good job of stopping heads becoming distracted from the stuff that they didn't really want to come into the job for.
Exactly, yeah.
Same with governors. I don't think governors came into the job necessarily because they want to set a budget and because they're an accountant. I think they wanted to become a governor of their local school to give something back so the kids got a better education.
And then another question along that lines, because obviously everything you have in place is phenomenal. Do you run the risk of like creating a bit of an echo chamber?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And how do you?
And that has
how do you combat that as a leader for you?
I am grappling with that right now.
Really?
And it's a problem.
Because if we're not progressing, we're dying, right? So if we're not moving forward.
So I think the way that we innovate in the model and challenge people to develop new systems, so at the school improvement level, I don't particularly worry. So okay. I don't worry about the lack of innovation of new systems to keep up and scan the horizon, because staff in our schools are being challenged to create new systems.
Got you.
However, where I think we run a big risk is that because people are of that same mindset around the same school improvement model and they're sure they're right, there's not as much internal challenge of people's thinking. And I'm worried about that at the minute. And I've told my exec principals that I need them to challenge each other and Jane, my deputy, and Deb in primary, and me more. There's not enough, there's not enough actually I disagree with this. I don't think this is the right thing to do. So I'm not worried about that mentality, that hive mindset from a school improvement perspective, but from a trust, strategic direction and educational philosophy perspective, I am worried. Because we're promoting so much internally that there's never someone from the outside coming with new thinking.
But that's really positive that you recognise that.
Yeah,
I think
I'm not sure I know how to deal with it.
No, but it'd be a concern if you was like, nah, fine, we're good.
Oh, no.
And I think the fact that you recognise that.
No, I'll give you an example. We made a curriculum decision, and I won't go into the detail, but someone came up with an idea, a curriculum structure idea. And I took that to my executive team meeting. I went around the entire table and everybody told me it was a great idea. And then we went to the first school and spoke to parents. And a parent, a lay person, who's not an educationalist, pointed out a glaring error that means it wouldn't work. And I was like, how have we got to a point where I have spoken to 12 head teachers, 4 executive head teachers about this, and then it's taken someone who is an estate agent, who's not in education at all, but has got a daughter at one of our schools to say, hang on a minute, doesn't that mean this? And we all went, oh yeah, he's right,
Yeah.
I think, wow. And I've used that repeatedly as an example of the need for us to challenge our own received wisdom. That we've been going around saying, oh, it's received wisdom, we need to challenge it. Well, the wisdom in our schools now is our own. So we better not stop challenging it. Otherwise, Michael Wilkins used to use an interesting phrase. He used to say, I quite like it. He used to say, I don't know if I'm out of step or a step ahead.
Out of step or a step ahead.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I think that, and I mull that a lot around you rapidly transform all these schools. You create an identity. You get a lot of plaudits. It's a nice place to be. Leaders don't leave. No one leaves. Everyone gets promoted. It's got a good feel to it. It feels like a family. How do you know when you're then actually dropping behind? Like when do you go from not only are we not cutting edge anymore, we've been left behind by the sector.
Wow.
So I've now started to send my team to visit other mats, because in the beginning you had to look in the mirror a lot and not much out the window.
And that's important sometimes.
Yeah, and it was time to hunker down.
Yeah.
And say, look, it's not that we don't care, it's just that we've got to sort our schools out. They're not good enough.
Implement the information that you already have, the knowledge that you have, and then
and then go and see what other people are doing.
Yeah.
And so we've been to Delta schools, and we've been to
which
ARCs,
is your brother,
which is my brother's schools, and we've been down to London and been to some ARC
How's Christmas
free schools.
with your brother? Do you sit there? And
it's a right laugh.
Do you talk about
schools? Yeah. He rings me when he's bored.
Yeah.
Like when he's driving. I can tell he has, because he doesn't want to talk about anything. He just says, "How you doing?" I go, "All right." He goes, "What you up to?" And I go, "Not much." And he goes, "Right."
On the Barbie.
Thought you might be up to something, you know. But we talk shop all the time.
Does that help for you?
Yeah. So I've had three big influences in my career. One was one of my first heads, Jackie Rothery, who taught me in the end that schools are all about relationships, really. And then Sir Michael Wilkins, who taught me about like that, he had that passion for vulnerable kids, and that you could systemize things, and that systems always work, and you don't have to adapt them, and actually people break them, and it's a nonsense, and all this kind of stuff. And then my brother, who when I started in this job, he'd already been a CEO for a few years, and it's a pretty lonely chair. Particularly when you're the person, if you're the only person who knows what you want it to look like, and you think you're right, but you're getting hammered from everybody.
Everyone.
Like everyone. So, you know, whether it's parents, or about the behaviour system, or it's the politics of the media around education, around exclusions, inclusion, whatever, all this, which really, really wears me down, actually. And then
it takes you away from being an outstanding leader.
Yeah, and when it got really hard, and it got hard a lot, actually, it got hard enough for me to think I wasn't going to make it a lot in 2017. And in the end, I just would always ring my brother and say, "What would you do about this?" And because he was 3-4 years ahead of me in that CEO journey, he would say, "Well, I tell you what I'd do." And that's all I needed. Or I'd ring Martin. I'd ring Martin Oliver, and it was still at Outwood at the time. And I'd say, "What would you do about this?" And he would, he'd say little things like, we were all over Look North for all these kids who'd been sent home from North Shore because of the uniform. And it was like on BBC.
Yeah.
And then obviously they came back a few years later because it had been judged outstanding in every category, right? But people forget the two stories might be linked, that you had standards and then the kids did really well. Like there's no connection, right? And I remember Martin texted me, I said, all over the papers about this thing, and he just texted me and said, "Well, at least people will know you've got standards now."
And that's what you need.
And I thought, yeah, I just needed to hear that, yeah.
How, as a human then, do you take that level of criticism? Because I know it's not personal really, is it? But there is
I'm a bit...
As a CEO, you do have a lot of weight on your shoulders, even within education, about whether it's money and whether it's about your responsibility and whether it's about trust of businesses now. That's a lot to carry for a human.
Yeah, so I have a great chair, Mark Sanders, who I have a strong relationship with, and I can offload some things to. And the founding chair of the Trust, Les Walton, was incredible with me when I first started.
We're in a school, guys.
Yeah, we're in a school. It's good. And you know because you're in a net school, that's the year 7 lunch.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. They do half an hour and then they have lunch on their own and then they do the other half an hour. So they get the dining room to themselves for a year.
Oh, nice.
It's quite nice, yeah. Anyway, what I would say is I'm finding this really difficult. Like I'm finding it really stressful. It's causing me a lot of anxiety and I'm getting quite upset. And he would say, "You're getting upset because you care." And I would say, "But I look at all these other CEOs, Les." I used to say, "But I see all these other CEOs who seem to just... Like they're not bothered, like they don't care." And he said, "You don't know they don't care. Like when they get home, they might be having the same conversations that you're having." And his view was, because you care so much, that's why you feel it a lot, and that's not a weakness. I'm tired of the politics of education because I don't think this academies, anti-academies, inclusion is the opposite of exclusion, even if they send kids to fail all their exams, as long as they don't get excluded, you're an inclusive school, nonsense. I'm really tired of it. And my response to it is I just don't get involved. I don't say much. I'm not on X. I don't comment much.
You don't accept people's requests on LinkedIn?
Well, it depends if I recognise them.
Don't be looking at Dave.
You might have had a shave.
Huh?
You might have had a shave. I'll do it now.
No, don't pretend that you.
I'll do it now.
Yeah, I will.
I'll do it now.
Anyway,
so I found I find it really difficult, and I think that the whole debate around whether schools should be academies or schools should be multi-academy trusts, completely unhelpful for the children of the country. I don't think it's a productive debate at all. I think it's really damaging, and it potentially damages the most vulnerable children. And I think we could do without it. But there's too much. People have too much of a stake in making a political football out of schools,
always.
and I don't know why we do that, because I don't feel like it's like that with the armed forces or the ambulance service. It certainly might be I suppose if you work in the NHS in a senior role, you'd say it is, but I don't recognise it in other countries either. I don't recognise that.
It's you need a collaborative approach.
Yeah,
in general.
And the whole risk of, the schools bill's interesting, but I think the whole risk is that it doesn't do either thing. So in a sense, what you've done 20 years ago, you chuck an hand grenade in, you create this thing called academies, you take all the worst performing schools in the country, you turn them into academies, and then you create something called a multi-academy trust for them to be part of. Right? And at its best, in the best examples of multi-academy trusts, they have achieved things in schools that you never thought were possible. Right? Including some of the schools in this trust. Never been good in their history. Transformational.
How many schools you got outstanding?
We've got 6, 7. All the 22 schools that have been inspected are now good or outstanding. But they're gradually not becoming outstanding. Every time they get inspected now, or they go like, you're not good anymore, you've gotten better. Oh, what are we? Oh, we don't give a grade now. Oh, brilliant, right. So I don't particularly have a view on whether that's a good thing either. I don't really mind. But interestingly, so you've got examples of multi-academy trusts who have done things that no one ever thought were possible in some communities. Then you've got multi-academy trusts whose schools are worse than they were when they were in the local authority. Like they've gotten worse.
Yeah.
So if you want to be really positive about multi-academy trusts, you can say, well, look at those trusts. Look at what they've done in those schools. Amazing, isn't it? And then if you want to give academies a kick in, you can say, I know, but look at these multi-academy trusts. They're spending more money at the centre than local authorities used to, and the schools are worse.
Yeah.
So what you've done is you've got 20 years into it, you've run an experiment for 20 years. Loads of the schools become academies, and you have examples where it's unbelievably amazing, and you've got examples where it's a car crash. And now I think you've got two choices. You go really hard, and even faster, and you just get the schools out of the trust that aren't any good, and you put them in a trust that is. Or you say, look, we've had it 20 years, we think it's a failed experiment. It's done some good, it's done some bad, we're going to try something new. The risk of the schools bill is, it doesn't do either. It leaves the maintained schools inadequate for longer, potentially, or underperforming or struggling for longer, potentially. It leaves the schools in the trust that are dysfunctional for longer, potentially. And it doesn't get rid of it. It doesn't do either. And I worry that we're going to end up with kids who only get one go at it in schools that aren't good enough for them for longer than they would have if we'd have been able to intervene.
Do you miss teaching?
I don't think I could do it now.
Do you not?
No, I'd be knackered, I think. I think it's a tough look. I don't think teachers. I'll tell you the difference between teaching now and teaching 30 years ago. Teachers now are expected to do less than they did 30 years ago, but they have to do it now. There was a huge list of jobs teachers were supposed to do 30 years ago. Not many did. So there's more accountability in the profession now. And you're more likely to be held to account for doing the job you're expected to do. And when you do that, it can be a tough job. It's not a tough job like being in it's not like being on an offshore trawler or something. It's not like being underground at the pit. But if you do it properly, teaching is a tough job. And it can be quite tiring. And I think that's why, as a trust, we've tried to do as much as we can on workload.
Yeah.
Because it is to think that you could be in that profession for 30, 40 years every day,
Need longevity to it.
And it can be exhausting, you know, and the more we can do to manage workload and to give people a bit of balance back in their lives, the better, whilst not compromising on outcomes for children. That's the challenge.
Last question, I ask every guest this. Normally we say 3, but I just want 1, I think. If you could sit down with any one person, dead or alive, doesn't have to be famous, could be a family member, it could be anyone. What one person would you sit down with?
From history?
It could be anyone. It could be...
Anyone. Wow, that's a really good question.
Thank you.
I can't have a dinner party.
Someone... all right, give me... How many, Dave? 2, 3?
2 or 3.
All right, we go back to... You just ruined my... All right, go 3
Okay.
people. 3 people.
Winston Churchill.
Okay.
I think.
So we've got Winston at the table.
Isaac Newton.
Oh, wow, okay.
With Apple.
With Apple.
Yeah. And...
With science.
Yeah, it might lean towards science. Neil Armstrong.
Oh, wow, okay. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
For your time.
Hopefully you might be able to get something out of that.
I would
feel as though I've just waffled.
I would normally ask, where can people find you, but there's no point even trying to find you because you don't accept it anyway.
They won't find, you won't find me on X, and you won't find me on Facebook, and you won't find me on...
but you will find him in the summer in Ibiza.
You won't find me in Ibiza. You find me in Scarborough.
Scarborough's nice. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I genuinely really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate how open and honest you was, the ups and downs of your job and what you're doing.
Yeah.
But always putting children first.
Yeah,
that's important.
That's right. Yeah,
amazing.
Child-centered.
Anyway, guys, there you have it. Here's another podcast. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.